And this week, the House of Representatives celebrated the passing of H.R. 1, deemed a voting rights bill.
H.R. 1, for the people. For the people. The first 300 pages were written by John Lewis to remove voter suppression tactics from our political system.
And the bill now heads to the Senate. If passed, legislation would be one of the largest overhauls of the U.S. election in recent terms. H.R. 1 would require states to automatically register eligible voters and offer same-day registration. It would also restore voting rights for former felons. It would also push states to offer 15 days of early voting, as well as enabling no-excuse absentee ballots. And for more, we turn to our panel. Robert Patillo, talk radio host and civil rights attorney, and Bo Davidson, host of The Bo Show and political commentator. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks, Natasha.
Thanks for having us.
And Robert, as a civil rights attorney, I'm curious about your thoughts on this voting bill, as there's been a lot of contention on both sides of the aisle.
This John Lewis voting rights bill is one of the most important pieces of legislation currently standing before us. The way I got started in the civil rights movement was in college, organizing the march for the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act in Atlanta back in 2004, which was signed into law by George W. Bush in 2005. The right to vote is dispositive of every other right. And just to give you some numbers real quick, let's understand how important overhauling our voting system is. Republicans in the last 32 years, since George H.W. Bush, since the end of the Reagan era, have won the popular vote exactly one time, and that was in 2004. They have not won the popular vote in a presidential election in the last 17 years. Right now, you have a 50-50 split in the United States Senate, but Republicans represent almost over 40 million fewer voters than Democratic senators do. Indeed, there are 15 Republican senators who represent a grand total of 38 million people, while the 2 California senators represent 40 million people. So the only way that we restore democratic rule in this country and stop the 100-plus pieces of legislation that have been meant to suppress the vote that are going on around the country, including in my home state of Georgia, where we are having piece after piece of voter suppression legislation pushed through by a Republican majority. The only way to combat that is by having federal legislation. This is what the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was about. And the reason that America changed wasn't that suddenly the Jim Crow South decided to change. It's that you empowered minorities to have the right to vote. You empowered everyone to have the right to vote in 1965, and that is what led to the progressive democracy that we have today. You don't get a Barack Obama without the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the fact that Republicans are trying to push back against the idea of expanding the right to vote shows that they are a party that is out of step with the majority of the American people.
And Bo, is this bill really the answer to voter frustration, and do you see it actually passing in the Senate?
I don't think it's the answer at all. In fact, I think it muddies the waters more than clears them up. You know, this bill is called the For the People Act, and I'm not so sure it's more for the people as it is so much for the Democrat people. Let's look at the automatic registration component alone. In California alone, 100,000 voters were incorrectly registered, okay? So that's automatically a problem. Then you look at the other components of this bill, wanting to federalize state election laws, wanting to prevent states from purging their voter rolls from inaccuracies. There's a push for D.C. statehood, and it doesn't address ballot harvesting at all. So I don't think this bill actually clarifies anything at all. It's not about suppression at all. It's about being pro-democracy, and this bill doesn't accomplish that. Now, with the fact that we know that the filibuster is not likely to be removed, and people like Joe Manchin saying it's never going to happen, I think this thing is dead on the water in the Senate, and I think it goes from H.R. 1 to H.R. done.
Interesting. Now, Robert, what about the section dealing with campaign finance? Would setting limits on spending infringe on any freedoms?
Well, as Bo just said, I think that's why this section is so important. Since Citizens United, we have given up on the idea of democratic elections in America. If you look at polling data, we have things such as the raising the minimum wage, coronavirus relief, universal health care, student loan relief, that are polling at 70 and 80% supporting among the American people, but you can't get a majority in the United States Senate because many of those senators are bought and paid for by corporations. Frankly, they should stop wearing suits and just start wearing wearing jerseys with logos on for the corporations that are financing them. The reason that we don't have environmental regulations, and as you were talking about earlier in the show, the issues with the Texas power system is because of the oil lobby being able to control the United States Senate. So we need to do whatever we can do to tamp down and beat back the corporate money that is going into elections. The last 2 election cycles have been the most expensive in U.S. history. There are senators like Warnock, who was just elected on January the 5th, who already has hundreds of millions of dollars of money coming in to fund opponents for the 2022 election. We have gone out of governance where we're simply allowing lobbyists and special interest groups to elect people, to write the legislation, and to govern, and the American people are just vassals to the oligarchs who were run by dark money, and the people who are against that, those are the people who need to vote out.
Bo, your thoughts on limiting campaign finance spending?
Well, this bill claims to drag dark money into the light, but there's a problem with that, which is there's a free speech issue. You know, there are donors out there who want to remain anonymous for valid reasons. They want to support candidates and causes that they care about without being dragged into the light. And if anything that cancel culture has taught us, it's that no one wants to be punished for a political belief, for a particular issue, a particular candidate. There are serious repercussions that can be faced for the mere talking about those issues and those candidates. So what I say is that's a terrible thing to drag those dark donors into light, because they have a right to the privacy and they want to support candidates and issues that they support without fear of repercussions. Now let's look at the other element of the other element of the 6-to-1 match of public funds. I don't know of anyone out there, an American citizen right now, that wants to support politicians trying to get reelected. That just doesn't seem like a good idea. So to line the pockets of more politicos and campaign folks who want to run attack ads and robocalls for candidates they don't even support, I don't see how that's really campaign finance reform.
Now, the Catholic Church just came out advising against the Johnson & Johnson vaccine if other alternatives are available. In a statement, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says the use of this vaccine raises moral questions as it was developed, tested, and produced with abortion-derived cell lines. However, Pfizer and Moderna vaccines also used abortion cell lines during the testing process. Robert, is it hypocritical of the bishops who did get a vaccine to come out against one vaccine and support the lesser of the two evils without a pro-life alternative?
Look, the Catholic Church needs to stick to dealing with all their settlements involving child sex abuse and stay out of science. Let's understand something. When President Trump needed his coronavirus treatment, I don't think he was in there asking which one of these treatments came from stem cells, which one. He wanted the services, and he wanted the medicine that will make him better. At this time, when we are facing a global pandemic, over 500,000 Americans are dead, and I'm doing this broadcast from my closet instead of being in studio. People need to make sure that they get whatever vaccine is available, and the Catholic Church has a problem with that. They need to take those billions of dollars they have in the Vatican, put some scientists to work, and develop their own vaccine that they can distribute on Palm Sunday.
Well, that leads into my next question, Bo. Do you think instead of criticizing, the Vatican could actually donate money to push for a vaccine that's pro-life?
I think they could, but you know, the Vatican's in an interesting issue. I mean, I thought this was already decided in 2005. Pope Benedict already said that any vaccine that was derived from fetal tissue was okay for things like measles and mumps and things of that sort. So this issue really kind of has been decided, but they're in a pickle. But the problem is this: they're for the public common good, correct? So they want to preserve and promote life. Taking the vaccine would seem purportedly promotes life. So if you're weighing the common good, I think they have to support it based on issues that have already come up in 2005.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much to our panel, Robert Patillo, talk radio host and civil rights attorney, and Bo Davidson, host of The Bo Show and political commentator. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's all for today's show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and use the hashtag TeamNVH. And for this show and more, download the Portable.tv app for your Apple or Android device. Scotty will be back next week. Have a great weekend.